Well, it was scary, obviously. Actually, it started a little sooner than that. When I was really young, I grew up really rapidly. I've worked 20-hour days, and I was also blessed. And I got to work with some very important people, and I got great results, and they told other people. So by the time I was 19, just almost 20, I had become quite successful in external terms, at least, in the world. And some part of me was, the mechanism in the back of our head, that 2 million-year-old brain, right? The fight or flight mechanism. I didn't know how to manage that so well. And part of my brain was like, well, maybe you have all this happening so quick because you're going to die young. And I literally became obsessed with not just getting hit by a truck or something, it was cancer. I was going to wilt away. And I don't know where it came from. And I knew better intellectually, but it was there. And then the first time I entered my life was before 31. I entered my life through someone else, my girlfriend. And she came home crying uncontrollably. And Jay, I mean, she was like, what is it? What is it? My mom, and my mom has cancer. And then even worse, they gave her 9 weeks to live. They just sent her home. And I think if it would have been me, I think my fear would have overcome me. But you know, most people will do more for people they love, whether it be their kids or their family or someone else, than they'll ever do for themselves. And so it's like I kicked into gear. That's what I do. It's like, okay, if there's a problem, there's a solution. I said, look, there's thousands of people that had stage 4 cancer and that are alive today. We're gonna find out what they do. We're gonna do the same thing. She's not gonna die. And then I just read every book I could on cancer. And I came across this one book called One Answer to Cancer. It's not the book I'd recommend today because there's so many better ones today, but it was written by this dentist who had pancreatic cancer, which is the most vicious cancer of all. He was given 6 weeks to live, and this is 12 years later, and he's alive. And so he laid out what he did to cleanse his body, which sounded radical in those days, pancreatic enzymes. So I went to this woman, her name was Jenny, she was in her 40s. And I said, Jenny, you know, I know you don't want to die. I said, but just going home and do nothing, why don't you read this book? This guy was in worse shape than you, and see if you wanted to apply this. And she read it, and she got inspired, and I gave her As a Man Thinketh to kind of work on her head a little bit. Anyway, long story short, within about 3 weeks, she had a tumor that was protruding in her shoulder and then one in her feminine organs. And you couldn't see anything 3 weeks later on her shoulder. And at the period of, I think, about 9 weeks when she was supposed to die, and she looked good, she had great energy, and like literally looked transformed. The doctor finally said, this is crazy, let's do exploratory surgery. So they went in her body, and all they could find left of the cancer was something the size of my pinky's fingernail. And so the doctor said, this is a miracle. And she said, it is a miracle, but let me tell you what I did. And he was like, no, this is spontaneous remission. I don't want to hear what you did. What you did doesn't matter. But she's in her mid-80s today, she's still alive. And that shifted me from victimhood, like, oh my God, cancer could strike me down, to believing I'll be great. So all the more shocking, now I'm a total biohacker, I'm a health nut, I've got to get on stage and do 12, 13 hours with 20,000 people, and I got to do it 3 or 4 days in a row, and I make these huge demands, but I also have this incredibly intense regimen of taking care of myself. And then I'm a helicopter pilot. So I went to go get my license renewed, you have to do a physical, and I come back and I keep getting these messages from the doctor saying, my assistant saying, doctor says he's got to talk to you. And I was like, I'm leaving for the south of France to an event, tell him to just send the report. And I got home this one night, and taped to my master bathroom bedroom door was a note from my assistant saying, you've got to call the doctor, he says it's an emergency. So what do you do? What do you feel like? Well, all my old fears just started flashing back. It's like, oh my God, I mean, I treat my body so great. How could I have cancer? But I do fly all the time. That's radiation. Your head goes crazy. At least mine did.
Yeah.
But
self-diagnosis.
But at that time, I had also found a center in my life. And so I found my center. It's like, okay, courageous person, coward dies 1,000 deaths, courageous person once. Let me deal with it if it needs to be dealt with in the morning. I woke up, called, and the doc says to me, you have a tumor in your brain. I was like, what are you talking about? I came to you, I'm totally healthy. I'm healthy as a horse. And he said, no. He said, you have an enormous amount of growth hormone. So I did some tests. I said, how'd you notice the growth hormone? My hands are bigger than your head. I wear a size 16 shoe. I was 5'1", now I'm 6'7". I grew 10 inches in a year. And he goes, no, don't be funny. He goes, you're gonna need to hear me. This is serious. And he said, you really need to do this. And well, do what? You gotta come in for surgery. I was like, wait a second. I said, you're telling me you're gonna cut me open? I said, what's the prognosis? He said, well, obviously you can die. Anytime you do surgery that's this complex. But he said, it's your pituitary gland. And he said, you're probably not gonna have the same kind of energy anymore because it'll change your biochemistry. And I was like, well, I think I should get a second opinion. Who would you recommend? And he did not have a good bedside manner, and I didn't have a good bedside manner either. I was a young punk kid who's like, well, how do you tell me I'm gonna have to have the surgery? So I kind of blew it off since he was such a jerk about it. I was like, I'll take care of it when I get home. And I flew to south of France and I did this seminar. But then, the mind starts going like, what if he's right? What if it's this? So I went and did the scan and I saw the look on the guy's face when I came out from the MRI. And sure enough, I had a tumor there. It was interesting though, Jay, it was a big tumor. That's why I grew 10 inches in a year. But it infarct, which means it swallowed a portion of itself up. It's still there. And he said, we still need to do the surgery. So I said, okay, he's a surgeon. Let me go to somebody who's more biochemically driven. So I went to this man in Boston, a neurobiologist, and he was really completely different. He was super warm. And he said, look, he goes, I would never do the surgery. It's way too risky. There's a place in Switzerland you can go to, and you can take an injection once every 6 months, and you'll never have to worry about it, because what they worry about is I have gigantism, it's called. It makes your arteries get really big, and then you have a heart attack. And I said, well, doc, you just said my arteries are perfect. And this happened 12 years ago. I said, why would I do anything? He goes, well, we just want to be certain. I said, well, what if I'm not certain the drug's not going to have side effects,
Yeah.
He goes, well, it will really make you tired all the time. I was like, tired all the time? I said, that's the opposite of my whole life. I said, energy's the source of everything for me. And he's like, oh, you're afraid, you're like Samson, you're afraid when to cut your hair. And I said, you're damn right I am, But he was so cool. I said, but the surgeon wants to cut me. He goes, yeah, the baker wants to bake. The butcher wants to butcher, the surgeon wants to cut, and I want to drug you. He was really cool. And I said, what if I did nothing? He goes, but I measured it. Like, I'm not stupid. I go measure it once a year or something. He goes, well, you could do that. And thank God I did, Jay, because 6 months later, the FDA, I was having to go to Switzerland because it wasn't available in the US, and the FDA never allowed it in because they found it created cancer. So I missed the bullet. I went to 5 other docs, so 7 in total. And the last doc told me what I wanted to hear, which was, Tony, you have a huge amount of growth hormone. But he goes, you literally do, I burn 11,300 calories in one day on stage, to give you an idea. This group followed me for 3 years that followed Olympic athletes and Tom Brady and people like that. And so they've measured everything in my body. And he goes, you're doing 2.5 marathons basically in calorie burn in a day, and you're doing 4 days in a row like that. He goes, your ability to recover is insane. He said, 2 or 3 days you recovered. He goes, that's coming from that growth hormone, I believe. And he said, so I know bodybuilders that are spending $1,200 a month to have what you're getting for free. So that was when I was 31. I'm 62. I've never had a problem since. I've measured it. But it really changed my outlook. And the first one made my outlook look like there is an answer. And the second one, my outlook was there's a price for certainty. And you got to be very careful what price you pay to be certain. You got to find that certainty within yourself, which I know is a lot of what you teach and I do as well, Jay. I had that question was burning in me because, I was traveling around, had the privilege of this stage of life, traveling around the earth and working with people from every walk of life, right? 100 plus countries I've worked in. And I'd see the same problems, even though you mean different cultures. Like, go to an Asian culture, it's not about the individual, it's about the group, right? But I'd still see the same problems. And then I got obsessed with it. Like, okay, what's the common human experience? Because I'm seeing the same problems, even though it's a different culture, even though it's different beliefs, right? And I began to realize that there's certain human needs. And there were 6 that I identified that I've used ever since, and it's helped me understand. And so one of those needs is certainty. And it's the base human need. Certainty that you can avoid pain and that you can be comfortable is the most basic need. It's a survival need, because if you have continuous pain, that's continuous damage. Continuous damage equals death, right? But what happens for people is most people, that first basic need is where they live, they don't grow. Another need, the second need is uncertainty. Because ironically, if you're certain all the time, you're bored out of your mind. If you're completely uncertain, you're kind of freaked out. And a balance is not it. It's the ability to use both, enter both worlds. And then there's the need for significance, which is a big part of our culture today, thanks to social media. That need to feel special, unique, important, right? It can be a very positive emotion or need. It can be very negative depending upon how it's used, how it's directed. And then there's the need for connection and love, which everybody has. And those 4 needs, everybody finds a way to meet. Even if you have to lie to yourself, work 20-hour days, you're going to find certainty somehow. You're going to find variety. You're going to find some form of significance. Some people do it by tearing other people down. Some people do it by working harder. It's different. You're going to find some level of at least connection, if not love. But the final 2 are what make people feel alive, which is growing. Everything in the universe grows or dies. And contributing. Everything in the universe contributes or it's eventually eliminated by evolution. So those are the spiritual needs, growth and contribution, where you get beyond yourself. And I think that the majority of us don't take moves because of fear, and fear is just uncertainty. It's that base need. And when I go around and I describe this in more detail, and I work with a big audience, 15, 20,000 people, and I'll say, have them do a set of exercises and have them figure out where do they get, what triggers them to be certain or uncertain, what triggers them to have variety and so forth. So they understand that like everything I do is to meet these needs. But then I get them to say, what are your top two? Not what you think they should be, not what you want them to be, what are they? And 90% of the people in our culture are certainty and significance, or significance and certainty, even though they really want love. So they have this route, like if I can be successful enough, then I'll be worthy of it. Or if I can just control it enough and know it's that way, but you can't control love, right? And so most people they're trying to meet their needs in a kind of a backwards way. And I think that fear, that uncertainty is what keeps most people from growing until they get enough pain. And then that pushes them through a threshold where their needs aren't being met, they gotta change. And unfortunately, most people wait till they have enough pain. Now, that's not my preference. I'm sure it's not yours, but I'm sure you've had experiences as much as I've had where you did have to be pushed that far to get there, right? In fact, if you're wanting to change but not changing, it's because some of your needs are met by what you're doing and some of them aren't. That's why you're in that push-pull, but you don't usually do enough until you're pushed over the edge. Like smoking a cigarette, what does it give people? Comfort, because you take a breath of cigarette, you take a nice, slow, deep breath in and take it out, it calms the nervous system, right? It's something that they're comfortable with. It's variety. If they're all stressed out and then they start to breathe differently, it's variety in the body. For some people, they did originally for significance. I'm cool, I'm smoking. Today, it's not really that cool to most people, but for some generations, some places it is. Some people see it as a connection with themselves. But if all of a sudden you're now in a relationship with somebody who doesn't smoke, and you really love them and you want their total love and attention, and they're completely disgusted by cigarettes, now my needs for love, right, are really strong, and my need for this comfort is really strong, and so you have this push-pull. And then some people make the shift, some people don't. If somebody were to tell you 5 years ago that you could reverse aging, people would laugh at you. But today, there are billions and billions of dollars being spent by the richest people in the world, mostly in Silicon Valley, and some of the greatest scientists in the world. And there have been breakthroughs in the last 5 years that are amazing. So there's a man named Dr. Sinclair, David Sinclair from Harvard. He's probably the #1 longevity expert in the world, and I write about him in the book. And one thing is he's 53 chronologically, but he's 33 biochemically. I've applied what he's taught me for 6 months now, since I met him, 7 months, maybe 8 months now, and I'm 62, but I'm 51. My goal is to get it down to 41 or 42 if I possibly can. But you go, how's that possible? Well, there are ways of reversing, everybody knows their body's made of stem cells, I'm sure by now. And there's ways of reversing the process of a stem cell, literally from skin back to pluripotent, where it can become anything. The man who did that was Dr. Yamanaka, won the Nobel Prize for it. David Sinclair took his work, applied it to reversing the aging, and he started with mice. And he took these mice that had glaucoma, so they burned out the nerves in the eyes, and those don't regrow. And he's the first time, he'll probably win a Nobel Prize from this, he reversed the aging process and grew back their eyes so they have sight again, to give you an idea. They're using gene therapy. There's a young man that I interviewed in the book there who was on America's Got Talent, who was blind, who now can see by this gene therapies. These are the types of things that just sound like magic. The book is filled with things where I interviewed 150 of the smartest scientists, Nobel laureates, regenerative doctors and scientists, to show you what's happening right now that you might think would happen 20 or 30 years from now. It sounds like magic, or within 36 months. That's what it's all really based on. But here's what I want your audience to understand around energy. So everybody's heard of the genome or their DNA, right? You can think of the genome as being like the piano keys, but the music is played by a player, which is the epigenome. Epi means above. And the epigenome is affected by your diet, your exercise, how much exposure to radiation, etc. Well, most people have heard that. But the epigenome really is governed by 7 master genes. They're called sirtuins. Now, your audience doesn't have to remember all these names, but just stay with me. Just think there's 7 master genes that do 3 or 4 things that are critical. First, they turn on and off the different genes in your body. That's the epigenome. And if you turn on the wrong ones, you age too soon, or your energy drops. So when this is fully fueled, when those sirtuins are doing their job, everything happens in the right way. Second thing they do is they reduce your inflammation, which is the basis of most breakdown in the body. Third thing they do, which is critical, is they help your mitochondria, which is the energy force inside every cell in your body, convert food into energy, into ATP. Pretty important. And then they have a separate task, that is they clean up your DNA. So at 35 or 34, you have a certain amount of exposure, more than when you were 20. When you're 50, it'll be even higher. At 60, even higher. Well, around 40, your stem cells drop off the cliff. Around 50, the sirtuins, the fuel of those sirtuins drops off the cliff, and that's called NAD, which I'm sure some of your people have heard about, you may have even spoken about. And you can do NAD as an IV. It doesn't absorb a lot though. NAD though has a precursor called NMN, like never mother never. I'm sure you've heard of it. And so I've known about that. And so, but I didn't understand that if you don't have enough NAD and NMN, then the body has to decide between, do I help the body turn on epigenome? Do I help it reduce inflammation? Because there's only so much. Do I really help it create enough energy in the cell, or do I clean up the DNA? So imagine you have a mansion and you have a young staff and your house looks perfect all the time because they're young and bright and they're on top. Things break down, no one notices, they clean it up. But as they get older and slower, and then there's less resources, NAD, now the mansion starts to break down. That's aging. So what Dr. Sinclair did is figure out how to supplement that NMN. And you can go buy NMN on the, you look on Amazon even, and there's probably a list of a dozen or so brands that do it. So we tested 6 of them just for price points of $39 a month to $129 a month. And there was no NMN in any of them. And I asked the lab guy, I said, are these people just thieves? He goes, well, most of it comes from China, so I can't say for sure. He said, but what I can tell you is what's more likely is NMN breaks down in less than 30 days. So by the time it comes from China, gets to your door, there's nothing in it. So they built a more stable NMN, which we have and use. There's a company called Microbiotech and Eden Rock, this merger of these 2 companies. They saw the power of NMN, and they said, if you could find an M&M that was stable and was even more absorbable, it would transform people. So for example, in a mouse, they give NMN to mice and they live 30% longer. So not all mice studies transfer to humans. They take an old mouse, like a 70-year-old person would be like a 20-month-old mouse, okay? So that's an old mouse. And they put them on a treadmill, and the most they can run without collapsing is about 1/4 kilometer. A young dynamic mouse, like a 21-year-old, can run 4 times that, a full kilometer. 14 days on NMN, and the old mouse, the 70-year-old mouse, will run 2 to 3 kilometers, 200 to 300% more. So again, I read about this and I was like, well, will that really transfer to humans? So this has been the breakthrough. It only happened a few months ago, right before I published the book. The Special Forces in Boston for 2 years has been doing a private study that's been top secret about using this new form of NMN that's called MIB 626. And it'll be available in 18 to 24 months. But it got out because the commander, they just finished the 2-year study. First year was safety, second year was efficacy. And the commander was debriefing his team and didn't realize there was a newspaper person in the room. So part of it got out. It was in the Daily Mail a couple weeks ago also, and they only know a part of it. I can't tell you the things. I'm an investor in the company. I can't tell you what's not public, but I'll tell you what's public. What the commander said was, here's what I can tell you, gentlemen. What happens with mice happens with the most powerful men and women in the world, meaning the most conditioned men in the world saw massive increases in endurance, just from taking this M&N, massive increase in muscle strength without any more stimulation, and most importantly, increased cognitive ability, which when you're a soldier, what's going to get you to stay alive when you're exhausted or beat up or injured or complete the mission is going to be your brain. So they're now doing studies on COVID with it. They're doing studies with groups of 40 to 60-year-olds that are just unconditioned, and they're seeing the same result. So in 18 to 24 months, the FDA will have, this will not be a nutraceutical. This will be something, go to your doctor, and imagine you get something that is natural, but you put it in your body, and now all 4 of those things I told you about are going full tilt. Now you're turning on and off the right genes. Now inflammation's coming down. You got more energy at a cellular level, and your DNA's being cleaned up. So that's less than 2 years away from us right now. I found that when people have more energy, I don't know what your experience is, that their behaviors change. When you're low energy, kind of lethargic, even the way you think, I mean, look at what COVID's done by just having people coped up and not moving very much, right? I've had a chance to use this product. There's products available right now of NMN. I've been using those, and they're very powerful, but this one is even more visceral. I mean, you feel like you're ready to buzz around.
I cannot wait.
It's like, it blows my mind what it does, right? So I think when people feel like that, my experience is they tend to develop different patterns. It's just like if you've ever gone on a cleanse, even for a short time, your palate changes. And all of a sudden, you don't like the things that you once liked. So my hope is for people there, but I don't just rely on that, as you know, because I teach people all the other ways to shift their life. But I think it's important to know that there are some tools available right now and some coming very quickly that will radically really change the value of your health. And also, regardless of your age, it's the whole idea is like to be able to take, as you get older, to stay younger physiologically and psychologically and emotionally, incredibly priceless.
Yeah,
and most people also, if they're going to find out about it, they've been pursuing something anyway, right?
Yes.
So it's like someone's going to pick up the book, Life Force. They're looking for answers. They want more energy or more strength, or they want to help somebody in their family that's dealing with a real issue, and they want to know the best. So it's like an encyclopedia. It's
it is. This is what I was saying offline. I was like, this is an encyclopedia. I was saying to Tony, I was reading parts of each chapter, but this is truly an encyclopedia. By the way, the cartoons make it unencyclopedic, but these are brilliant. They're hilarious, and they truly crack you up. So one of the things I wanted to dive into with Tony was that same thing that I experienced, and I want to hear it from your perspective. You've been biohacking for a long time. What are a few things that you've shifted in your behavior that have created more energy?
Yes.
That shifts that actually helped you expand your energy, right?
Yes.
Like you said, you're serving more people right now. But even when you are traveling, you're moving around the world, you're coaching sports teams, you're coaching individuals, you have groups.
Yeah.
How have you been able to expand your energy year over year? What are some of the simple tweaks that people could do today while they wait for this amazing product?
Well, there's products now, they have them now, but for me, it's, I was a vegan for about 10 years. And then I ate fish and salad basically for about 12 years. So dietarily, I've always tried to make sure that what I had was as clean as possible to start with. Then I train like a crazy person. I do oxygen restriction training type of thing so that my capacity is strong. But I'm also trying to train so I can literally do 2.5 marathons on a day, and then another day, another day, another day. For me, the most important thing I think has been for me is, believe it or not, has been a combination of hot and cold temperatures that I use. Like I start every single morning in the freezing water, and I do it for two reasons. One is it moves every bit of blood in your body and all your lymph in your system, but also kind of train my brain to say, when I say go, we go. It's like, there's never a day I look forward to going in the water. And I have, 56 degree water here, but in my home in Sun Valley, I go literally through the snow and get in the river, which is, like 39, 40 degrees in the wintertime. But you feel so incredible when you come out, but also it's just training your brain saying, I say go, we go. It's not like, oh, I'm not ready yet, or let me wait 5 minutes. And that becomes a discipline in your mind for everything else in your life, which is huge. And then, believe it or not, saunas, I just in the last year I've started using saunas. They've seen a huge change. I've always known about saunas. I use them every now and then. Good times create weak people. Weak people create bad times. Bad times create strong people. Strong people create good times. My whole thing is leaders anticipate, losers react. If you can anticipate what's coming, you can really take advantage. If you wait till it hits you, you're in trouble. The biggest problem people have is they think they're not supposed to have any. Problems are the fuel for growth. It's like if you don't have any problems, you're either a liar, or you might call them challenges. It feels better. I understand that. Anybody who doesn't have problems is either totally asleep at the wheel or they don't have much of any kind of a life. But then there's fulfillment. And fulfillment is living what you're made for. Is it a lack of confidence? No, it's a lack of mission. I like winning. I like being the best at what I do. So I'm not going to settle for less than that. Why would I? Michael Jordan making 1,000 shots before you take a break. So you look at Jordan, or you look at, LeBron, or you look at anybody who's the best in the world at what they do, and you go, aren't they lucky? But if you actually study them, you'll see they're doing things, they're practicing in private things that make them certain in public, and they get rewarded for what they do in public.
Yeah.
And you got to do the same.
When you just know you're going to mess up, it's not going to be perfect, you're going to forget that line that you really wanted to say, but just put all the energy on the audience, everything starts to change. If you stay ready, you don't have to get ready.
It's a shift in your identity. Every single day, 6 days a week. What matters? A few subjects, your body, because your energy matters. That energy is low. Everything I just said is worthless to you. Because when you're low energy, you don't use your full intelligence or ability. You need emotion. If you don't know how to master your emotions start wars. Emotion creates peace. Emotion gets you children. Emotion is what can make that business work or fail. And most people don't know how to direct their own emotions. Let me be conscious about feeding my brain things that are going to give me not only inspiration, but insight and skill and tools. 68% of the Fortune 1000 were started in either a recession or a depression. Well, the first skill you gotta master to be great is the ability to recognize patterns. When humanity recognized the pattern of the seasons, the whole world changed. Because we went from hunter-gatherers trying to survive from place to place where we're exposed to everything, to wait a second, if we plant in the springtime, we protect in the summer, we reap in the fall, and then we hang on to some of that so we can live through the winter. That created communities for the first time, and then eventually cities and states and countries. So that changed the world. What'll change a person's life is when you realize there's also a set of seasons in your own life. And so think of it this way, 0 to 21 is springtime. Things are easy to grow in springtime. You don't have to do that much. Growing as a kid happens naturally. But overall, life is supporting you. It's sending you, teaching you, sharing with you. Now, when you get from 21 to 41 or 22 to 42, whatever range you want to talk about, you now are in the real world. And now you go test what you learned in your springtime. So you start to learn, test, figure out what's real. And it's an important stage of life. 42, 43 to 62, 63 is the power of your life. If you worked hard in the spring and the summer, and you put yourself out there and you planted, it's a reaping time. It's a time when you really become a leader. And then if you're lucky, you go from 63 to 83 and maybe 83 to 103, and you have an extended final season of your life where you get to be the mentor, you get to share. You get to make a difference. And maybe towards the end of your life, people look out for you again after you looked out for everybody else. That's kind of the cycle of life. What if you're born in 1910? World War I ends, the world looks like it's a great place, new technology, cars, radio, and then what happens? An explosion of abundance, the roaring 20s, and so you're a kid, you're 14, 15 years old, and you're like, I can't wait to get a car, to go. But what happened when that person hit the next stage of life at 19, 20, 21 years old? As they came of age, it's 1929. And suddenly, people are jumping out of buildings, total depression, Dust Bowl, nobody's got jobs. It looks horrific, and it was horrific. But did they get a break? No, when they turned 29, it's 1939. It looked like the whole world was gonna end. Hitler was sweeping across Europe, bombing London. It literally looked like the world as we know it was over. This is what gives me great optimism for everyone watching here. Winter's not forever. No pandemic lives forever. Everything changes and everything ends. And the good news about winter is it's always followed by springtime. What follows the night? The daytime. What a cool way to set it up if you were God or the universe. The first thing I do every single morning is I go in freezing cold water. And when you jump in, it never feels good to go in, but getting out, you feel incredible. But I do it for a different reason. I do it to train my brain to say, when I say now, it means now. When I say go, we go. I don't stand there because it's cold and go maybe in a minute when I'm ready. But I always do it because I've trained my brain, this is how we work. And if you train your brain to do that every single day, then it'll do it on the more difficult and important things in life. But the essence of it is, I change my body radically, and I do 3 things to make sure that my brain is primed. And what I mean by primed is, most people think their thoughts are their thoughts, Lewis, and you and I know better. Most people just don't understand that you are being primed all the time, and unless you prime yourself, you're gonna be primed by the environment. So I wanna take control of my brain, so I do 3 quick things. 1, I take 3 minutes of those 10 minutes, after I've changed my body, and I focus on 3 different events in my life that I'm grateful for. I usually pick 2 big ones and 1 small one. It could be as simple as a smile on my daughter's face, and it changes your biochemistry. Then real fast, I do this 3-minute process that's kind of like a blessing, and then 3 minutes, the last 3 minutes are called 3 to Thrive. where I focus on 3 things I want to accomplish, but instead of thinking I want to accomplish, I see, feel, and experience it as done. I feel grateful, I celebrate it, and it trains your brain. So in 10 minutes, I'm done. Third thing that I'll do, I immediately send a message or a text or an audio message to somebody as a sincere compliment. And I don't go, dude, great job, or wow, you're cool. I say, hey, listen, I saw you on Tuesday with those kids, and I saw you take that extra 20 minutes no one else did. And I just want you to know, I saw that, I thought that was incredible. So I'm always very specific so they know it's not just some positive thinking bullshit call, it's sincerely doing it. It makes me constantly look for the good in the people I work with. Fourth thing I do is whatever I don't want to do, the most challenging part of the day. What's a story we all love? It's the comeback story. It's the comeback, it's the Rocky, it's that music where all of a sudden you step back up and you take control and rock.